We'll move on actually talking of Villa, and we can talk about Aston Villa, Pete, because we know that Douglas Luiz deal seems to be stalling as well. There's some hurdles. Can you give us an update on that, please, and the potential reasons for the delay in the move happening?
Yeah, it looks like the deal is back on. It did stall for a bit because of Weston McKennie, his side of it being in part exchange. The player, reportedly had priced himself out of a move to Aston Villa. He was looking at big wages to make that move back to the Premier League, but it seems now that Juventus and Villa have come to an agreement to take him out of the deal for Douglas Luiz, and now the Argentine midfielder Enzo Barrenechea is going to be going to Villa along with Samuel Ealing Jr., a young English player who is very highly regarded. So it looks like this deal is now back on, and we fully expect Douglas Luiz to make the move to Juventus. So good signing for Juventus. I think they're paying just over £25 million plus these two players going the other way to Villa Park. So I think it looks a really good deal for Juventus. I'm sure Villa will look at it as a good deal for them as well. They're getting some cash in, which will help with FFP, and they're getting two young players in Barrenechea and Ealing Jr., who will obviously bolster the squad, which Villa are going to need to do next season with Champions League football on the menu at Villa Park as well. So yeah, Villa have been busy in this transfer market so far. It looks like they're getting Ian Maatsen in from Chelsea and then letting Douglas Luiz go with those two players from Juventus coming in as well. So I think 3 new players in for Unai Emery is a good start to the window for him, but still a surprise to me that they have let Douglas Luiz go. I thought getting Champions League football would have played a key role in keeping hold of the Brazilian at Villa Park for next season as well. And I did think there would be other clubs who maybe would come in and try and sign Douglas Luiz after hearing that Juventus had come in for him, but it does seem that the player is happy to make the move to Turin, and he will be playing in Serie A next season.
And Pete, what does that then mean for their starting midfielders next season? Could we see them sign a top central midfielder potentially, or do we think the two coming in, it might, potentially fill that void? What do we think for Unai Emery's squad next season?
Yeah, I'm sure Unai Emery, in an ideal world, would love a high-profile marquee signing in that midfield to replace Douglas Luiz, because they are big boots to fill in that Villa team. I thought he was excellent for them last year. He's scored 10 goals and 10 assists as well, I think. So he is going to be a huge void in that midfield as well. They are bringing in Ross Barkley from Luton as well. So that's another midfielder that's being added to the squad for next season. And he had a great season for Luton last year, and he has had previous before at Aston Villa when he had a loan spell at the club. So he will go somewhere to maybe replacing Douglas Luiz. Totally different players in that perspective, but he will add numbers to that Villa squad ahead of their Champions League campaign next year. But yeah, a lot will come down to what Villa can do in the transfer market budget-wise, what else they've got available to go out and sign a top midfield player, because it's not easy to sign these top midfield players because they are huge price tags as well, and they have shown interest in Conor Gallagher, who obviously we've talked about on the show earlier, and everything surrounding his future at Chelsea. So he's a player that they have looked at, but I think, again, he might be quite pricey, and the player himself maybe not that keen on a move to Villa Park as well. So Unai Emery, and I'm sure the recruitment team, will be looking at alternatives to see if they can bring in another midfielder, because they're definitely going to have to replace Douglas Luiz, who will be a huge loss.
And Paul, to pick up on that Ian Maatsen deal, what do you think that means for the club, the likes of Luca Dean, Alex Moreno, and how much of a concern will it be for those players with Ian Maatsen coming in?
Listen, I think it's an area that Villa need to recruit in. I like Matty Cash, I like Luca Dean, I like Moreno, but I think when you play the high line that Unai Emery plays and the way that he wants his team to play and his back four to play, you have to have fullbacks that have got pace, and that's the reason that Maatsen's come in. I think it's a great deal for them. I think it's a fantastic signing. If I was looking at those 3 players, Matty Cash and Luca Dean are the 2 that I'd be worried for my future there. Moreno was brought in by Unai Emery. I think he's his first signing, if I'm not wrong. And I wouldn't worry if I was him in that position. He's obviously a player that Emery knows a lot about, knows that he can play in his system, and knows that he's quick enough to do what he wants to do. But next season with the Champions League, listen, Real Madrid could be coming to Villa Park, and as much as Luca Dean and Matty Cash are good players and I like them, the realism is they've got to move on. They've got to go to the next level. Real Madrid could be there. Atletico Madrid could be there. You could be looking at the likes of Barcelona. You could be like Inter Milan. And if you're going to play a high line against some of the players and the quality that they've got, you could be found wanting. So that's the thinking behind the Maatsen deal, and I get it, and I can see that the area that they're strengthening, the fullbacks. I like Pete agree with Douglas Luiz. I can't understand. I don't see how that's a good deal for Villa in any way, shape, or form. Two players that are untried and untested, really, at the level of the Premier League, international level and the Premier League level. But then you're also getting 20, 25 million in for a player that was so influential last season. He had such a big season and played such a big part in why Villa did well last year. I understand they're getting quality players in, they're getting young players in, and they're bolstering the squad. But Ross Barkley coming in is a good signing. That what he did last season against Luton, for Luton, and Maatsen's a good signing. But they need the players that will take them onto that next level, because they are, like we say, Champions League football.
And Pete, we know Philippe Coutinho is returning to the club this summer. Do we expect him to leave? And actually, could we see any further exits from Villa Park following potentially? Sorry, Carla, you can go.
Yeah, I fully expect Coutinho to be on his way out of Villa Park on a permanent basis this summer. He's obviously been playing in the Middle East in the last season. He was a big signing when they did sign him when Steven Gerrard was the manager, and he did have a decent impact in his first 6 months at Villa Park, but he's not in the plans of Unai Emery. He's happy to let him move on. Obviously, he's a big wage earner at Villa Park as well, so I think the club and Coutinho are now working to try and work a mutual cancelling of his contract to allow him to leave on a free transfer. And it does look like the former Liverpool man, Coutinho, is eyeing a potential return to his native Brazil come this summer as well. So, yeah, I think it makes sense for everybody involved here to part ways. He's not going to break back into that Villa team. He's not going to win favour back with Unai Emery. And as I said, the player can move on and Villa can save money from his wages, and that can go towards potential other signings as well. So, yeah, I think it seems inevitable that Coutinho will say goodbye to Villa and probably return to Brazil this summer as well. And again, probably just hasn't worked out for him as he had expected when he did make that move back to the Premier League with Villa under Steven Gerrard. But different managers have different ideas, and he just doesn't figure in Unai Emery's plans.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.